I am indeed in Albany.
And they're actually going to probably get hit with this a little worse than we are here. Is that true?
This is what we're hearing.
Yeah,
it's snowing here right now as we speak.
And
I'm tired of the nor'easters, though, right now.
Yeah, this is number 3. It's really crazy. All right, I want to get into a few issues, and I want to ask you right off the top on this. I had somebody point out to me that, as part of the SAFE Act, there was a restriction on how many rounds there could be in a cartridge, and it went from 10 to 7. That's been challenged in court. Two federal courts in New York have said it's unconstitutional. They struck down the 7-round limit. So that happened in 2013, 2014. Based on that, is there a chance now to go back in and officially change the law, Joe?
Yeah, I think that would be an opportunity. In fact, my belief would be once the court interprets of a law, then that is the law.
Yeah.
So, and it should be modified from a legislative perspective. Obviously, there's still going to be resistance here, but I never understood the number to begin with. I think it was an arbitrary number at the time that was just thrown out because it just didn't make any sense. There was no logic or reasonable formula that was utilized that could be explained. Yeah. So my belief right now would be the courts have ruled that is the new law. So, but any changes should be made legislatively and could be, but it still may be difficult politically here. But to me, once the court has rendered a decision of interpretation of the law, that is the law.
I want to ask you. We recently had Ed Schmidt in a studio talking about what can be done for schools. What should we do right now? Should we be talking about legislation, or should we be talking about making our schools secure? I know you guys all met in Albany as well. Do you feel we're at least making a step in the right direction?
Absolutely, it's a step in the right direction, but we need to take action. So I applaud the county executive and the BOCES superintendents for bringing people together and understanding and appreciating the need to do something. We're hopeful that you'll see action at the federal level and here at the state level because that's incumbent right now. It's good to have ideas, but we really need to do something. There's too many risks out there to children and teachers. So we put together the beginning of and in my opinion, Bill, this debate has to center around a number of issues. A lot of people focus on the guns, and that can be a topic of conversation, and there are things that we should examine and consider. But equally as important is the mental health system. Equally as important now is the fact that we have to harden the schools to protect these students and faculty that are in these schools. We need to talk about the culture of violence through, in my opinion, desensitizing young people with some of the type of games that are being presented and things of that nature. So it's got to be a complete conversation of a comprehensive conversation with so many of these elements in order to attack the problem. Now, on the school safety, from a school safety perspective, we passed a number of bills that would increase the ability of schools to hire security personnel, to have state funding mechanisms, because you can't expect that these districts are going to be able to absorb this, or the local governments. Yeah. So we need to step in, and I think we have an obligation and responsibility, as well as the federal government. So it's infrastructure investments, it's increasing access to mental health services, expanding some of the other actions from an intelligence coordination to protect schools. We've got a bill here that's going to talk about monitoring social media. And I also believe, Bill, there's got to be a consequence to some of the copycat things that we've seen right now.
Right,
I'm an older guy, so we used to do the bomb scares, if you remember that.
You called in some of the bomb scares?
They used to be the bomb scare threats when we were growing up. Yeah. No, I didn't do that.
You're right. That was the thing in the 70s. It was streaking and bomb scares. That's what happened in the 70s. Today we're going in and shooting up schools and taking lives. I don't understand what the mentality is here.
Well, it's a reflection, I think, of society, and there are a number of things that contribute to that. You can talk about, poverty, discrimination. There are a number of factors, bullying, things that all may contribute to this, and I'm not a clinician, so that's why it's important. The one thing I want to emphasize is we need to involve and include the people on the ground here when we're looking at ideas. It's good for us to take action. It's good for us to propose ideas, but if we don't have that interaction with administrators and teachers and even students to listen to what their fears are and what they believe can be done, I thought it was fascinating. I don't know if any of you caught it on NBC. They had a school in Indiana that really hardened their building to the point where they had panic buttons and doors that would be shut that were bulletproof, a live feed into the sheriff's department. They even had devices where they could throw smoke to disorient anybody who was walking through the halls as an intruder. So these are the type of things, unfortunately, that are a sign of today's contemporary society, but we've got to invest in order to ensure that happens.
Yeah.
And what I was saying to begin before when we were talking about the bomb scares, there's got to be a consequence to these individuals who are making these threats, too. You can't be just slapped on the wrist. They've got to do jail time, in my opinion, regardless of the age.
Yeah.
And because it's got to stop. They've got to understand that there's such great anxiety and fear out there, as well as the threat to public safety, that we've got to deal with that, and that's got to stop.
I do have to ask, though. You would, so what happened at the middle school at Jarvis and Mohawk? 2 girls, 2 boys, we're told. These are middle school kids. You'd put them in jail?
Well, you have juvenile detention facilities.
Yeah.
I do believe that in order to prevent this type of activity, for people to know there's a serious consequence, it could be a simple thing like 2 days or something, but they need to know that there's a consequence, and there also should be a financial accountability to the individual, and if the individual can't afford it, to the family. So,
man, I got to tell you how much money was spent in this community last week. It's just incredible. I'm going to ask you a question.
Yeah, I just wanted to follow up, I guess, kind of on that point. You talked about increasing penalties for copycats. You mean copycat threats or copycat actual shooters?
Well, no. The shooters, obviously, we've got to go after regardless of who they are, and there's a number of contributing factors, I think, from a mental health perspective, and we talked about a societal perspective, Jeff. I'm talking about the individuals who are calling the things in right now, who may be just calling it in or saying something to get attention or to cause disruption in that school system. Now, some of those also may be legitimate, obviously, that may have issues, and it's a sign or a signal that has to be dealt with. All I'm saying is there's a consequence for the action. Now, if you commit the crime, I believe there should be a capital punishment element down there in Florida. I mean, that young man, they're not seeking capital punishment right now, but in my opinion, he should face the most severe consequences possible. He killed over 14 people.
Yeah. Joe, is this and I mean, I'm not sure that we can, you can look, I read an editorial, there's a pro Claudia Tenney editorial in the paper today, and this person
But you wouldn't read it, though.
I did read it. I said I was going to read it. I'm fair in that regard. I might have rolled my eyes as I read it, but I read it, okay?
On the air?
On the air, yes. It was on
You
the
could
6
hear
o'clock
the
hour.
eye roll.
But during that, breakdown of the American family, the fact that both parents today have to work, the fact that 55 years ago we began cutting funding to mental institutions, and instead of having people institutionalized, we basically set them out onto the streets, and there would be communities that would take care of them. And then, as of late, we've cut that funding. Is this a whole bunch of things all together that has created this breakdown? Because everyone that does one of these things seems to be mentally ill in some way or another.
Yeah, and if you talk to psychiatrists, they'll tell you there's various elements to that, and they don't necessarily agree all the time, and I disagree, even though they're the clinical experts, that these are not contributing factors. There's different elements of illness, right? Look at the Charlie Mansons of the world. I don't think anybody's going to ever understand there's a criminal brain, I think, in that perspective. But from your point, yes, all of that is important elements of the conversation that have to be taken into consideration as you develop policy and as you implement actions. I believe, Bill, that we should be keeping mental institutions open because in some cases, some people are, I think you're not going to be able to cure this.
Yeah.
So you're going to have to treat it properly. The individual at Newtown in Connecticut, I think he should have been institutionalized. Now, it doesn't have to be like a lot of people remember, like One Flew Over a Cuckoo's Nest, where you have that type of institutional setting. It could be more like a daycare type of setting where people can come out, go back.
Well, look at the Utica Psychiatric Center. I mean, the crib and some of those stories. And Joe, what is interesting is this kid in Florida goes off. How many times police had to come and all of a sudden they begin to know these kids' names. And we have the same type of thing around here. Mm-hmm. Look at the Bumbelow case. I mean, The only thing different about the Bumbelow case is that he didn't use an automatic weapon. He didn't go into a school. It was the most grisly murder that anyone... I mean, it's to the point where police, they won't describe it because what they saw was so horrific. But again, it goes back to mental health, and it goes back to at what point does somebody snap? Because if they don't snap, we can't punish them. And I'm not sure this is easily. Well, clearly this is not easily solved.
Right, but I think it's detectable, and I think there are things that we can do to try to help and to alleviate some of the problems.
The kid in Florida shouldn't have had guns, right? I mean, if he was mentally insane, he shouldn't have had guns.
And he should have been treated. Apparently he wasn't treated, and then you had also the lack of institutional inter-coordination and communication when you knew there was serious threats that were made that were never followed up on. So there was a whole series of things, unfortunately, that can be learned from that situation down there and that act of violence. But we need to do something about it. We can't continue to keep talking about it. We need to now actually take action.
Do you see, when you say take action, do you see limiting the AR-15? Do you think that should be done?
No, I think right now, I think there's got to be a conversation relative to guns. We talk about background checks, the bump stocks, things that are obvious right now, and there seems to be more consensus that we can move forward on. But as you indicated, and as I said as we began this interview, it's a myriad of factors and issues that have to be taken holistically and comprehensively. If we don't look at everything and say, what can we do from, first and foremost, in my opinion, now we have to harden schools.
Yeah, I agree. You got to make schools safe.
Threats are occurring, so let's make the schools safe.
If you got a leak in your gas tank, you plug the leak. If you have a threat in your home, if you have a fire, you put out fire or you prevent a fire from happening again. That's what we have. We've just got to make sure that if somebody gets into a school and they're nuts and they have a gun or a knife or whatever, that we can stop them.
Absolutely. That's first priority. Then as we move down, we can have the discussion on mental health programs, screenings, the aspect of proper training, the aspect of guns, the element of cultural violence that exists. I mean, we have to be mindful of our First Amendment rights as well as our Second Amendment rights. But on the other hand, what are we doing? As you talk about the fabric of society. How are we today? What is contributing to this? Now you need to talk to sociologists and psychologists, people like that really would have a better understanding and appreciation. It goes back to what I told you initially. We need to include these people as we're developing policy.
Yeah, people who know, they're on the ground, they know what's going on. All right, lightning round here, Joe. I'm running out of time, and I know you are too, but there's stuff I want to get to. Measures the Senate has taken on sexual harassment, and is this for the general public, or is this something that you're targeting people that are on the public payroll?
No, this would be private and public. I think it's important based on what we've seen and the movements that are occurring across the country now calling attention to this. So this was a comprehensive package, and I believe we will see action being taken by the state of New York at some point, either in the budget or after the budget. And we did a very comprehensive package yesterday that would include both the private and public sector.
Are you saying that part of this, though, would prevent someone from cutting a deal, paying someone off for anonymity? Yeah, I mean, you got to respect individuals who may not want to have their names included, but if there's a payout, that the public have a right to know. So this deals with a lot of things here, from establishing statutes for the definition of sexual harassment, prohibiting anonymity. How do you handle? Let me ask you this: how do you handle the guy or the woman that was falsely accused? They have means, and they don't want to go through the public humiliation of some people believing they actually did it. So they cut a deal to take the psycho out of the picture so that the story never sees the light of day. I mean, that person is innocent. They're going to have to give their name. No, they don't have to give their name. It's prohibiting the anonymity of the accused in court-approved settlements. But that's my point. You could have someone accused who is not guilty, the victim faking the whole story, and that person would not be able to cut a deal to pay to make it go away? Well, now you're getting into a real hypothetical situation with the situation relative to the victim and challenging whether or not the victim was right or wrong. That's something. No. I'm getting into, there are people who are falsely accused that instead of fighting it, they decide you're better off just settling out of court. Companies do it all the time. I think you have to. Well, there's got to be the ability. In government too. It happened in government. Yeah.
So yes, this would prohibit that type of at least the disclosure of the case, if not the individual names.
I'm not sure. I understand where you're going. I'm not sure that I completely support that, but
understood. It's a tough topic.
Yeah, it is a tough topic.
One more clarification on that. You said something about defining what actually is a sexual harassment or a sexual crime.
That is correct, Jeff.
So explain it, because, not to go on a sidebar here, but we've talked about this where you have victims of rape and forcible rape and horrible, horrible crimes being lumped into a category with someone who says, and I don't want to, I'm not just casting this away, but someone who says maybe somebody kissed my neck one night at a bar. That's not rape, and they all get lumped in together. Talk about what you're talking about.
Well, I mean, look, first we got to start with there's no place in our government or society for sexual assault or harassment. I guess we would agree with that, right? And this what this is it is landmark legislation in that regard, where it defines in statute sexual harassment, bans settlements, prohibits mandatory arbitration. So it deals with all these areas of what is now out
where
there.
Where I think this gets confusing is if we're talking about a politician who has pushed his whatever up against the female aide, and then we pay for the settlement, and everybody has to remain quiet. I'm all for that changing, but I think this has to be a case by case situation. Allow a judge to make a decision to be able to how we treat each case. I think it having
the
a blanket.
State Division of Human Rights has a definition that it uses, but there's no currently there's no definition in the statute.
Right, but having a blanket, I don't know. Something has to be done, but I'm uncomfortable with. I sometimes fear we go too far, and it ends up infringing on the rights of people who are not guilty.
I understand what you're saying, and I guess part of it was that in the past, litigants were subject to various interpretations by judges who would potentially improperly dismiss harassment. So what this is trying to do is set a uniform definition based on federal regulations, unwelcome sexual advances, requests for sexual favors. We had an interesting debate yesterday that went into what you're saying. One individual, one of the members of the Senate, talked about whether or not forcing someone to dress a specific way. For instance, if you were a female and you said, I want you to wear short skirts and high heels, is that sexual harassment? So I understand what you're saying, but that's what we're trying to get to. And in the end, this is a piece the Senate has proposed. The Assembly will have a variation of governor, and there will be opportunities for people to weigh in.
Why can't we just have a new law that says public money cannot be used to settle cases from perverts that are in power in Albany?
Because it goes beyond that. It happens. We've seen this happen in the entertainment industry and private business. It's not just government right now. I look at the Harvey Weinstein. Look at Matt Lauer. So there are a lot of...
Yeah, but these guys can be charged with rape, and the reason that they weren't is because the people didn't come forward and report it. They felt they were in a tough position because they might lose their job, but I don't know how you legislate that.
Well, I mean, I think the concern here is that this is a prevalent problem. It has to be dealt with, and I think this legislation deals with basic fundamental rights for individuals who do not want to be harassed or abused in any way. So I do believe that, yes, there's some. I understand what you're saying, and there are some points that you're raising that could be considered problematic. But I think overall, the legislation is a good, solid piece of legislation that deals with the problem and does give people due process. What is in place?
What isn't in place right now? Because I got to tell you something. In our workplace, if someone, if you go after, if you were in a situation where I could only advance at work if I were to sleep with my boss, and they told me that, don't I already have the ability to sue there? Don't I already have aren't there laws already protecting me at this point?
Some are, some aren't, and that's the reason for this. It's as I indicated to you, it's a uniform definition of sexual harassment, and it's based upon a number of things that exist within the human rights laws, federal regulations. So it's not like that we've come up with a whole new thing. It would stop the secret settlements. There's mandatory arbitration, prohibiting mandatory arbitration. That goes to the point that you indicated earlier, protects non-employees in the workplace. It's a uniform policy for all the branches of government, too. So taxpayer funds shouldn't be being used for individual sexual harassment settlements. So it deals with all these issues that have been brought up over the course of the last several years, but particularly over the course of the last several months.
All right, I want to. So much for a lightning round. We really got stuck on the thunder. I'm sorry. I just to tell you, I'm a bit worried about this legislation, but let's see where it goes. Pharmaceutical gag order legislation. Let's try to stick to it here.
Well, that's an important thing, Bill, because that right now pharmacies, the prescription benefit managers, these big companies, sometimes can put gag orders that won't allow a pharmacist to tell you that you can get a cheaper medicine than they, and I think we just want to stop that. So the Assemblyman Brindisi and I sponsored a bill, and then Senator Hannan had a similar bill. That's the one we acted on. It's before the governor. This is good for the consumer, for patients, so that they're better informed about the price of drugs.
I like it. I like this one. You could go to Macy's and get more information on this. When you go up to the counter and you go to buy something at Macy's, and they say, wait a minute, do you have a coupon? And I say, no. They pull out the coupon for me. Yeah. They do really well at Macy's.
Well, it's amazing that
pharmacies should do the same thing.
Because of these gag laws.
Yeah, that's crazy.
That there's a cheaper product doing the same thing.
Terrible.
From a generic brand.
I like this one, Joe. Efforts to help veterans find jobs. How could we be against this?
Exactly. It helps a career assistance program. We do some good work in our area. Vinny Scalise and all those guys are working the Veterans Office at the county. So this just makes veterans eligible to receive job placement services that are offered through SUNY and CUNY.
All right. And the agriculture legislation package.
Well, that's important. Ag's the number one business in our state, and this just provides a number of incentives to continue to grow agriculture and to ensure that it remains. And we recognize that it is the major industry in New York, agribusiness.
All right. And Syracuse, what will they do Wednesday night? What do you think?
I think they win. I think they win. Yeah. They looked really excited. It's been an up-and-down year, right, for the Orange. But hopefully Boeheim's got them all ready, and they can get into this. It's going to be an interesting tournament. I think I like UVA, but I don't know that Villanova goes that far, even though they're good. I think some of these number one seeds were pretty interesting this year. Yeah. Xavier. So it's good. It's always fun, though. But we got two of it. It's March Madness. I love it. But we also see March Madness not only in the basketball courts but in the corridors of the Capitol.
Will you be in the St. Patrick's Day parade this year?
I will. Will you?
We will be.
We'll have tomato pie.
We'll be looking for you. We'll have tomato pie.
Will it be green sauce?
It's a Utica thing.
Does he have some green sauce?
No. Green sauce. I'll have to ask him about that, maybe.
That would be kind of cool, right?
Yeah. All right, Joseph, thank you so much. Senator Joe Griffo, we appreciate
your time.
A pesto might do the trick. Yeah.
All right.
Very nice.
Take care, guys.
Thanks,
be safe.
Joe. Thank you. Senator Joe Griffo.